This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Liverpool bowed out of the Champions League midweek, and now their focus must quickly switch to getting back into the competition next season. Welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Matt Addison, and we'll get into both of those topics very shortly with Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and David Lynch alongside me. Before, of course, we preview Monday night's clash with Leeds United, pick our teams and our score for that at the end of the show. But we'll go in chronological order first, though, and we'll begin with the midweek Champions League exit Gorsty at the hands of Real Madrid. The disappointment for me, really, was that Liverpool played rather quite well. They got themselves into positions, but they just could not score a goal.
Yeah, familiar theme at Anfield, isn't it? Liverpool not winning and not really, well, not scoring. But this was probably the best they played, certainly in 2021, possibly all season given the standard of the opposition, but just couldn't get the all-important first breakthrough, could they, that would hopefully have led to the second one. And big chances, wasn't it? Mohamed Salah early on. I think maybe that chance might sound a little bit silly, but I thought it possibly came a bit too early. You know, I think there was only 2 minutes on the clock when he had that massive chance and Courtois saves with his foot. The big one was Wijnaldum, wasn't it, just before half-time, and he's about 8 yards out and somehow just blazes it into the Anfield Road end. And I thought Liverpool absolutely flew out of the traps, really. And if you were watching from home, you wouldn't really have known that it was a game without fans there, because Liverpool really did come out and they were ready for the fight. But without supporters in there to just kind of push them on when the energy levels dipped and dropped a little bit, it was noticeable, I think, for the last 15-20 minutes. That Liverpool kind of ran out of steam and looked a bit short of ideas, and were happy to just kind of pass it around in front of Real Madrid. No one was willing to run in behind and have a real go. So I thought they started well. As I say, probably the best they played for a good while at home, but faded in the last half hour, 20 minutes or so. And it's a shame, really, because I think had there been fans in there, I think given the way Liverpool started, I thought Real Madrid would have wilted, because they absolutely flew out of the traps and could have had two or three. Milner was unlucky, wasn't he? It was a great save, but I think those big chances from Salah and Wijnaldum in the first half are the ones that Liverpool look back on and rue a little bit. But as Klopp said after the game, Liverpool lost that quarter-final tie in Madrid rather than at Anfield because they were nowhere near the best last week.
Gorsty mentions the fans there, Joe. I mean, they were obviously a huge miss. We've said that at times for lots of big games this season. Is it too easy to say that if fans were there, Liverpool would have got the job done, or do you think that maybe that would have been the case?
We'll never know, will we, I suppose? But, you know, I'm with Gorsty. I think it would have made a difference. I think, can you imagine the roar after, you know, Salah had that chance in the opening minutes? You know, even if he hadn't scored it. If you think back to when they won 4-0 against Real Madrid, Torres did a little turn, if you remember, he did a little back heel and turned, one of the lads, and had a shot which was saved by Casillas. It was almost the same timing, really. It was very, very early on, and Casillas made a really good save. So that was a huge chance, and I always remember that night, the roar of the crowd. It just gave Liverpool even more impetus to go on and create more big chances. And before they knew it, you know, Real Madrid were blown away. Look, I'm not saying that definitely would have happened because we don't know. Liverpool may have continued to miss chances, but you know, we all know that the fans have been Liverpool's sort of trump card in the Champions League. And you know, whenever they've come up against an opponent, I don't think anyone can be prepared for the impact that they have on a game and how loud Anfield can be. You know, I truly think there's very few stadiums in world football that can recreate the atmosphere of Anfield. And I suppose we all would say that, but we've all experienced it. We all know what it's about, and it can be crazy. So I think it would have been fantastic if fans were there. It could have been a different story, but it's hard to say. And again, I think Klopp's right. You know, the game was lost in the first 45 minutes in Madrid. I mean, you know, I still think Klopp should take a large amount of responsibility for that. I think he got his team selection wrong, and Liverpool just didn't do it in the first half in Madrid. And it's a real shame because, again, you look at the final four in the competition, and Man City, PSG will be the overwhelming favourites. But you know, I think Liverpool would have fancied their chances of getting to the final, and anything can happen in a one-off final. So it's a real shame, but hopefully fans are back next season and Liverpool get their great equaliser back, because I'm sure it'll be a different story if that's the case.
We're going to go on and talk about the top four race, Lynchy, very shortly. But I suppose just in terms of the Real Madrid performance, even though Liverpool have gone out, they surely have to take some hope from the fact that, as Gorsty says, they did play, generally speaking, quite a lot better than what we've seen them at Anfield of late.
Yeah, and it's important because it's two decent Anfield performances on the bounce as well, isn't it? Which we haven't seen for a long, long time. So, I thought against Aston Villa, even though they won it only late on, they played really well in that game, and it would have been unfortunate if they'd have come out of it. The narrative would have completely changed around the game if they'd have come out with just a point from that one. So it's good to get that going. Hopefully, it can sort of inspire a little run of form at Anfield, because they're certainly going to need it. They've been so poor there recently, and if they are going to get top four, I don't think they needed to put an incredible run together, given what's around them in terms of the teams that they're up against aren't fantastic, but they do need to be decent. And I think if you can just guarantee that they will win the rest of the home games, for example, that would be a big boom, wouldn't it, in terms of going forward to securing top four. So yeah, two good performances on the balance, and like you both said, really, it would have been nice to see, wouldn't it, what would have happened if that first goal would have gone in, and they would have probably got the reward, I think, then for the good performance against Real Madrid, but wasn't to be. And you just hope that they can take the positives out of that, regardless of the fact the result went against them, and use that for the remainder of the season. There
were a few sort of grumbles among some fans when the team sheet landed, Gorst. Diogo Jota from the start, James Milner was in midfield. But as much as Klopp maybe got it wrong in the first leg, did the performance maybe suggest that he got it right in the second leg?
Yeah, I can't have too many complaints with the team, to be honest. I thought Milner was one of Liverpool's best players, and I thought they sorely lacked his leadership and his know-how in the first leg when they looked lost at times, didn't he? I mean, the decision to start Naby Keita, Klopp himself admitted it was a mistake, and the fact that he brought him off 2 minutes before half-time when he wasn't injured was a neon sign that pointed to the fact that he knew he got it wrong. So I thought Milner was excellent. He's obviously not going to give you the same qualities as a Thiago or a Keita, but by the same token, those two probably couldn't do what Milner can do, and it was 2 minutes on the clock, wasn't it? And he thundered into a tackle into Benzema and set the tone, I thought. Nearly scored one of the great European goals in Anfield, didn't he, with that curled effort from about 20-25 yards. Great save from Courtois. And yeah, I thought he wore the armband with distinction on Wednesday night, because Liverpool, without Henderson, without Van Dijk, have looked a little bit rudderless at times, I think. They just haven't had a leader on the pitch when Milner isn't there. And we know Wijnaldum takes the armband as the kind of choice captain, but he's a bit of a different captain, isn't he? He sort of just plays his normal game, and people will look to kind of follow his lead by example. But I thought Milner was almost a bit of an inspired choice, really. It's just a shame, as we said, that one of those big chances just couldn't have went in and really made it difficult for Madrid for 60, 70 minutes or whatever it might have been.
I think, Joe, when Thiago was signed last summer, this was probably the type of game that you'd expect that he could take Liverpool to the next level and really help their midfield. What do you think it says about his season that he was left out in this one and James Milner and others were preferred in front of him?
Well, first of all, like Gorsty, I think Klopp got the team selection right on Wednesday night. Where I think he got it wrong was in Madrid. And I even think you play Thiago. Personally, I think you should have played Thiago in Madrid. Away from home. Really, really experienced Champions League club. The type of games that Thiago has played ever so well in last year. During Bayern Munich's run, he was virtually man of the match in almost every game. And to me, that was the type of game you play him in, for some control. I think if Klopp had wanted to be a bit more risky in Madrid, then he should have played Milner and not Naby Keita. But yeah, I mean, we've discussed that. He got that wrong. In terms of Thiago, this is based on nothing, but just a hunch that I've suddenly decided that I have. But I've got a feeling he might sell Thiago in the summer, and just I don't think that is based. That's just purely my thinking, but I think not picking him in any of the last 3 games was just a bit of a sign that Klopp doesn't think that things are working and wants to try and revert to type a little bit to get Liverpool playing again and try a few different things with Keita. So look, I mean, I'm probably way off with that, but I don't know. There just seems to be something not quite right. There's been moments where Thiago's looked absolutely brilliant. When he first came in against Chelsea, he was very, very good in the first hour before he was injured. I just thought he was outstanding. Looked like he was going to take Liverpool to new levels. When he came back against Newcastle again that night, I mean, just looked like again he was going to take Liverpool to new levels. And then he's just got a little bit stale. And I haven't really wanted to say this about him, but sometimes you can get good players and they just, for one reason or other, don't fit in. And I always remember Veron at United, and I still think he was a very, very good player. For just one reason or another, it just didn't work out for him at United. And it could go that way for Thiago. I just think it's strange that he didn't pick him any of these games, and I have a slight fear now that perhaps it's Klopp signposting what he might do with Thiago. He's a 30-year-old, isn't he now, Thiago? So he's not someone that is young and is going to learn new things, if you like. So we'll see. I could be very, very wrong, and I'm sure people will quickly tell me if I am. But I just feel like something isn't quite right.
What do you make of that, Lynchy? Is it too soon to judge Thiago, given the injuries and the situation at Liverpool this season? Could it be the case that it's a different Liverpool and a different Thiago next season, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't think we should get away from the fact that he has, he's been disappointing. We've seen odd flashes of his brilliance, haven't we, this season? But let's be honest, I think we all sort of expected a lot more. I know the injuries and COVID and the disruption that has caused to his season, but I think we did all think by now that it would maybe be a major part of that midfield, and that just hasn't happened. I think what has happened with Jurgen Klopp at the moment, I think he's made the decision that until the end of the season, as Joe puts it, revert to type. He wants to put this team back into playing a very familiar style of football that, for example, that James Milner sort of typified, really, that high pressure, not a great deal of quality in midfield in terms of passing the ball, but, I'm talking high level quality, but just keeps things solid in there and allows the fullbacks to create. I think he wants to go back to that sort of familiar pattern to make things easier for the players during this run-in and just try and get them over the line in the top 4 chases as well as he can. I think that's the idea. That obviously is bad news for Thiago, because I think he's going to feature a little bit less as we reach the end of the season. But I think in terms of giving up on him, I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. Personally, I think for Thiago, Klopp has spoken about him for so long, hasn't he? In terms of he's one of his favourite players. He wanted to work with him for so long. I think going into next season, full pre-season behind him, and sort of get more and more embedded in the team. And I think there might be a slight tweak in how Liverpool approach games going into next season. When they've got the time to do that, I think then you'll see a lot more of him. And I think if Klopp's in a position where he's thinking about offloading any midfielders, and I think Naby Keita is much nearer the top of that list. I think Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's possibly in trouble as well if a decent offer comes in. So it's been frustrating and sort of disappointing at times from Thiago, but I think we can expect a little bit more. And I do think that the Klopp will hope to see the best of him next season. I think if there are changes in that midfield, I don't think that he would be one of the ones who maybe moves on.
Well, one thing I would say on Thiago, just before we move on, Matt, is when he came to Liverpool in the summer, he was looking at it, he's thinking, I'm going to be coming to the Premier League champions, I'm going to be playing in front of Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez, I'm going to have Fabinho and Henderson and Wijnaldum next to me, and it just hasn't happened. Just a fact. I think he's the closest he's played to playing in what you would argue was Liverpool's strongest 11 was the Merseyside derby, and Alisson wasn't in goal that day, and Virgil van Dijk went off after 10 minutes. So at no point this season has he played in the Liverpool team that most people know it as. So I think it's probably a bit too early to judge him in that respect. So I think certainly he hasn't been the world-beaten superstar that his pedigree suggested that he could be when he joined. There's a case to be made for him being actually Liverpool's, certainly the Premier League area, the most high-profile signing, for the last 25 years, given that he's only ever played for Barcelona and Bayern Munich, and he's one of the most decorated players of the last 10 years. So he hasn't lived up to that, but I would certainly be giving him a go in a full-strength Liverpool team before the start making definitive judgments either way on that front.
Can I just add in before I wasn't saying that I personally think that he should go or anything. I just think, I don't know, I just got this hunch. When Dave was talking about the midfield there, it made me think twice about my hunch, because I think there probably will be some players depart in there. But yeah, I just feel like something isn't quite right. And the way I saw it when Thiago came in, I thought, well, with Wijnaldum not signing a new contract and still not signing a new contract, the obvious position for him looked like Wijnaldum's, didn't it? You would have had Henderson, you would have had Fabinho, and then obviously injuries have disrupted that. But Wijnaldum still endures, and Thiago seemingly doesn't. So it just makes me wonder, why is it that Klopp wouldn't look to Thiago now? And maybe it's just a case of trying to be pragmatic and get through further in the Champions League and try and get into the top four. But it does make me wonder why you wouldn't then use Thiago when it looks like Wijnaldum doesn't have a long-term future at the club.
Yeah, certainly something to think about moving forward into the summer. Just before we move on from Real Madrid, I'll come back to you, Gorst, on this one. In terms of Sadio Mane's performance, I thought he was slightly better against Real Madrid, certainly, than he has been at times, but he's still nowhere near the Sadio Mane of old, is he? No,
he started really well, didn't he, up against Fede Valverde, who's third choice right back. Not even a right back, he's a midfielder, and that really showed. I mean, with no Carvajal and no Vázquez, Valverde was shunted out there, and Mane gave him a torrid half-hour first half, and he looked a lot brighter, didn't he? Put that ball in for Salah early on, and then the one across the face of the goal a few minutes later. He looked a lot better in the first half, but like pretty much the rest of the team, he faded, didn't he? And he just looks to be a player just going through a huge confidence crisis at the moment. There was the big one for me was probably the chance at Arsenal early on when he goes through, cuts inside, and Firmino's peeled away and taking the marker with him, and he starts to play Firmino in rather than opening his body up and getting the shot off, which we've seen him do countless times at Liverpool. And I think Firmino was a bit surprised by the pass, and he's another player out of form, isn't he? And I think he just hit him on the heel, and the chance went. And I think he might just be overthinking things a little bit too much, and his confidence isn't anywhere near as high as it has been. And he's still a quality player, of course, but it'd be nice to see him get back to some sort of normality between now and the end of the season, because let's face it, if he can, then Liverpool's chances of getting in that top four increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Liverpool out of the Champions League, but still very much in the race for the top four, Joe. And we'll move on to that now. What do you make of the current standings? Would you say Liverpool are favourites to get in there, or how do you sort of see it shaping up?
Well, certainly not favourites, because they are behind the pack, aren't they? But I don't know, it does change, doesn't it, quite quickly. This league season's been one of those seasons that you win a couple of games and suddenly you can change your mind. I think, was it back after the Leicester game and after the Chelsea game, I thought it looked like the chance had gone, but suddenly Leicester have lost all form and Liverpool have put themselves back in there. And I think we were asked recently to predict our top four, and I was looking at it and looked at the games, and I fancy Liverpool to get quite close. Whether they'll actually do it, I can't say. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like Leicester are going to slide away. Chelsea, I think, will stay there, and Leicester will slide like they did last season. And it's whether they slide enough and Liverpool put enough wins together to take their place. But I certainly wouldn't bet against them. They're of any team, they look like they have the know-how. They look like they've recovered a bit of confidence, certainly in the way that they're playing. And I think the Aston Villa win was huge in terms of confidence and in terms of belief. And this Leeds game will be very interesting, because Leeds won't be afraid to come and have a go at Liverpool. They'll throw everything at them, and there'll be chances for Liverpool. And if Liverpool take some and they win the game, I think they'll take huge confidence. I think Leeds away and United away is the two, probably on paper, toughest games they've got left. So, I think this one's going to be a really, really tricky one, but it's one of the ones where you can take great confidence. So I'm not too sure what their rivals are doing this weekend, but I suppose with Liverpool playing last, the pressure could be massively on either way, couldn't it, to stay in touch or to take a big step. So we'll see what happens, but I'm feeling more confident than I did certainly a few weeks ago.
Yeah, in terms of the fixtures this weekend, Everton play Tottenham tonight, both of those in top four contention, I'd say, and both Chelsea and Leicester are in FA Cup action, so neither of those two playing this weekend. So Liverpool could, I think, be up as high as third, depending on how West Ham go to Newcastle, I think, on Saturday. So I suppose, David, that sort of poses the question of, even though if Liverpool were to win on Monday night, they'd have played a game more than a couple of their rivals, they could be up there. They could have, I think a point less than Leicester at full time if Liverpool do win. Is it a case of, obviously Liverpool have to get the points on the board, but is it almost just as important for them to just let Leicester know that they are there and they're breathing down their necks and just to put the pressure on those teams?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, Leicester we saw last season fell away badly, didn't they? And I think their heads will be chocker with the thought of the same thing happening again this season, because, the pressure's on now, the form sort of fell away, and, Jamie Vardy's not really been amongst the goals recently, and, you've had other issues in terms of the COVID breaches and what effect that has on team morale and all that. So I think if Liverpool, it's like we say, isn't it? And Jurgen Klopp will say this as well. Is literally just try and win your games, and if Liverpool can win 2 or 3 on the bounce from here, they really will be up there. There's absolutely no doubt they'll be in the race. They don't have to do, like I said earlier, anything fantastic to finish in this top 4. I think they just need to win a decent amount of games in this run. And then you look at the run-in that the other teams have got, and not just Leicester, West Ham, Chelsea, Tottenham, Everton. They've all got sort of difficult games in this run-in. Some of them got really nightmarish run-ins, in fact. And Liverpool's, I think, the only team they play who are above 10th is Manchester United away. So they could even afford... Liverpool, no doubt, could afford to lose that game or get away to Manchester United, which I think they possibly will, given their Old Trafford record, and United have been decent this season. They could afford to lose that and still finish in the top 4, because the rest of the fixtures are quite kind. I think, going into Monday, that will be a big one, just as you say, in terms of making the other teams know that they're there and that they're in the race for finishing in the top 4. But it's also a game they should be looking at with a bit of excitement, because Leeds are a little bit... they can be open, can't they? They can play into Liverpool's hands a little bit. So it's a real chance to sort of make a statement and say, okay, the Real Madrid performance was good. The result didn't go our way. We're still confident and good enough to get in the top 4 and to chase down these teams. And the gap is not big at all. There's not a lot of work to do. So just get those first 3 points on board against Leeds and you'll be right in there.
Matt, just looking at the fixtures then, I mean, how important it is for Liverpool to stay in touch in the next 2 or 3, like Dave's just said, if they can win the next 2, Leicester play their final 3 games of the season are United away, Chelsea away, Tottenham at home. So, but before that, they've got Palace at home, Southampton at home. Sorry, no, Southampton's West Brom at home, Palace at home, Southampton away. Chelsea play West Ham away, Brighton at home, Fulham at home, and then their final 3 games, or 4 games, I should say. City away, Arsenal at home, Leicester at home, and then they play Villa. So, for Chelsea and Leicester, the 2 teams above them, West Ham are above them as well, but the 2 favourites are supposed to get in those positions. They have a nightmare run, don't they? Like Dave's just said, that before the end of the season. So if Liverpool can win a few games and just keep the pressure on them, then one of those 2 teams could really slip away. So makes you more optimistic from a Liverpool point of view, doesn't it?
With Chelsea as well, that Champions League progressing to semi-finals, unless you go and win the competition, that will just end up being a nuisance for them in terms of getting the top 4. They've also got FA Cup to worry about playing against Man City. So stuff like that could, really play into Liverpool's hands, hopefully. And if that week, I think Chelsea are probably the strongest team in that entire mix, aren't they, other than Liverpool? And if they're going to really suffer with the amount of games they've got and the difficulty of the games they've got, then that really bodes well for Liverpool, just slipping into one of those spots, whether it's 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, I think Leeds, Gorsty, the second hardest game for Liverpool in their 7. They definitely have the easiest run in it. Is it a must-win game then for Liverpool in terms of putting the pressure on? Or do you think, just given the fixtures and given the other team's fixtures, that a draw wouldn't necessarily be the worst result in the world?
To be honest, I don't think Liverpool are really in a position to be saying that games aren't must-wins. I think they've only got 7 games left. They've got to try and win as many as they can. Obviously, the big one is Old Trafford. Liverpool historically haven't been great there. I think they seem to freeze whenever they turn up at Old Trafford, even though they've been the better team for the last 3 or even 4 years or so. So that's a difficult one. That is one where I'd take a draw off you now if you're offered me it. But the rest that Liverpool have got to go and win it, because they've got to make these points up, haven't they, somehow? And yes, it's going to be a tough one. And Klopp's made reference twice, in fact, to the fact that Leeds are at top of the physical stats, as he says. Probably the hardest running team in the division, and historically tend to fall away, given how hard that Marcelo Bielsa works them. And that might be something that comes into play on Monday night. But I think they'll be absolutely fine, won't they? Having just beaten Manchester City and Liverpool, there's a little bit of needle between the two clubs, two sets of fan bases. Certainly on Leeds' side, I'd suggest, and it's going to be a tough one, I think. Liverpool's away record has been good. To be fair, I think that's one thing that they can point to. I think it's gone under the radar because of how bad they've been at Anfield, but generally away from home since the turn of the year, they've been very good, and they're going to have to be again on Monday night because, as we've said, it's not in their hands, is it? So they've just got to go and win. And I do think Leicester, with that running they've got, I do think there is a potential for them to slip away. And I keep saying to myself, well, it's only West Ham. Keep expecting them to kind of slip away, and maybe they will as well, because they can't keep scoring 3 goals every game. They've scored 9 in the last 3 games, haven't they? And they've only won, they won 2 of them, and Arsenal obviously clawed it back. So I'm hoping they're going to slip away as well. But it's Liverpool have just got to win their games.
What do you expect from Leeds on Monday, Joe? Is it a case of, Leeds maybe have beaten Manchester City? They've not got a huge amount to play for. It could be a really open game, I think, between these two teams.
Definitely. It's funny with Leeds, because I think they're not the sort of team who I'd look at the last game and necessarily think it's an indicator of how they're going to play in the next one. They're very up and down at times. And, you look at that and they went down to 10 men, still seem to stay and win the game. And they're just so unpredictable, aren't they? You don't really know what you're going to get from them. They can come out and score a few goals. They can struggle. It'll be really interesting. But as we've all said, they will leave gaps for Liverpool. It could be a good game for their forwards. They'll give up chances, and we've just obviously Salah's been in form all season, scored a lot of goals. But for Firmino and Mane, those are the 2 players that have struggled on and off this season. So it could be a good game for those 2. One of them needs to be at it if they play, and it could be a good game to try and get them a bit more confidence, because they'll get chances and they'll get space to run into. So, as we saw earlier in the season on the opening day, Leeds are very, very dangerous. So Liverpool can't take anything for granted. It's just going to be a good game. It's very, very hard to predict, isn't it, because of the nature of the way Leeds play. But it's going to be a really good game to watch, and I think both teams will really go for it. So really looking forward to it, actually. And I don't know what Gorst was getting at with the needle between the 2 clubs, because I mean Leeds have got a bit of needle with everyone, haven't they? It's just they're set fans, but they, I always thought Leeds are a really good traditional English club. I'm really pleased that they're in the Premier League, and I quite like that. I like the manager. I like their style. I like a lot about Leeds. So just really, really looking forward to the game.
Yeah, I think in terms of the way it pans out, David, it could almost go one of 2 ways. I think they will, leave gaps for Liverpool to exploit. But do you think there's any sort of worry for Liverpool at the back in terms of Leeds putting them under pressure, flooding the box? This is going to be a real test, I think, for this Liverpool defence.
Yeah, very much so. I think one of the biggest issues that Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak have sort of struggled with is not necessarily if there's that aerial bombardment against Leicester teams. I think it's the fact that Leeds are going to want to play in behind them constantly. We know Phillips isn't the paciest. I think Kabak's got the physical qualities to deal with that a little bit better, but he's still a young player, capable of switching off. We saw our Real Madrid, and obviously I'm not comparing Leeds to Real Madrid in terms of the level of quality, but in terms of their approach, they might look at that and see how easy it was to sort of, if you get pressure-free possession in the centre of the park, get your head up and pop a ball in behind, and Kabak and Phillips don't necessarily drop to compensate for that. And, even if they do drop, they can be beaten for pace, both of them. So it's, I think that's going to be the real test for Liverpool. You do just hope that, if it does descend into a mad shootout, that Liverpool can come out on top, although the worries around the form of a couple of the forwards, that's not great going into it, I suppose. But it has all the sort of potential to be a really exciting game. And I just, for Liverpool, they'll just hope that, if it does go a bit mad, that they're the ones who can come out on top if that's the case.
Just before we finish, then we'll pick our teams and go through that. And Gorsty, I'll come to you first on this one. I think Alisson will certainly be in goal, but in your defence, are you going to keep it the same as the defence that kept a clean sheet against Real Madrid, or is there maybe a shout for someone like Kostas Tsimikas to come into one of these games?
No, not for me. I think Liverpool have got to keep it as strong as possible now, and any thoughts of giving fringe players a little run out to see how they do, they've just got to shelve it. It's been a long, hard season. But there's 7 games left, and it's time to really dig deep and go for it, I think. So it's go back and Phillips again for me, and it's Trent and Robertson and obviously Alisson.
And Joe, any changes to that for you, or are you sticking with that same defence as well?
No, I think it has to be that. Like Ghosty says, I think it's too big now for Liverpool to start trying to move things around in defence, and they've got decent breaks now between games. So yeah, I think it's going to be that form.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Lynch? You look at the fixtures now, and all season it's been once every 2 or 3 days for Liverpool. They seemingly have a game, but I think there's only the West Brom match between now and the end of the season that's midweek. The rest of them will have pretty much a week apart. I suppose it's good news for the first 11, probably not so good news for 1 or 2 of those ahead of this summer. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, you mentioned earlier. They're probably not going to get the opportunities that they might like. That's
it. I think if there was ever a week where, say, maybe Kostas Tsimikas was going to come in at left back, it was maybe for the Aston Villa game, wasn't it, in preparation for, give Robertson a rest ahead of the Real Madrid game. The fact that didn't happen suggests that we're probably not going to see him, probably not going to see Ben Davis, we're not going to see, any of these sort of fringe players very frequently at all between now and the end of the season. So I think the team for this one and possibly for the remainder of the season probably picks itself.
What are you going to do in midfield, Gorsty? Is there a case for James Milner to play again, his former club, and obviously another game where Liverpool are going to need a load of intensity?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Matt. For those reasons that I would be starting Milner, particularly, as you mentioned there, just a bit more intensity, because Liverpool are going to be knee deep in a fight, aren't they, with Leeds? I mean, every time I see Leeds, it's clearly an instruction from Bielsa. They don't give up anything. There's no lost causes. They'll throw slide tackles in to concede a goal kick to the opposition team. They literally just throw the body in front of everything, and they obviously try and play, and they've got plenty of pace and mobility, but they do enjoy a little bit of a scuffle. So Milner for me is a must almost, which is strange to say, but I'd have him in there, and then Fabinho, probably with Salah is the first name on the sheet these days, isn't he? And then it's a case of who gets that third midfield spot. Curtis Jones obviously injured. Oxlade-Chamberlain, he's only started 3 games all season, so it's probably Wijnaldum leading the chase ahead of Thiago and Keita, isn't it?
Have we lost Pat?
I think we may have. So if you want to give your team, Joe.
I'll carry on. I wasn't sure if he was just concentrating very hard on your team. He's back. I just thought you were concentrating very hard on Gorsty's team. What, did you actually hear any of that, Matt? Or
I didn't hear any of that, but
it was really good.
Yeah,
I'm sure it was.
Best thing Gorsty said all year. How do you follow that? I don't quite know. I can't believe he said it. You asked about Milner. Gorsty carried on about Milner. I think absolutely the same. I think Liverpool will want that physicality, the pressure. It's funny with Milner because I think he reaches this point almost every season in the last few seasons where, people start thinking maybe he's kind of over the hill. Probably isn't the right phrase, but you think, is he starting to be on the way in his Liverpool career, and then he comes back and shows you how useful he is. And the last few games he's done that, and I'd have him in there again. And I'd have Thiago in there, despite everything I've just said about him before. I kind of think it might be the type of game where I just want to see the Thiago that we saw in that Everton game, where he could exploit spaces in behind and try and play balls in behind for Liverpool and try and get, when Liverpool do get the ball back, I think there will be gaps for them to get into. So I'd like to see him playing those forward passes. So I would have him ahead of Wijnaldum and then Fabinho. But I think Klopp would probably go for Wijnaldum.
I think, Joe, a few weeks ago, we'd probably be talking about Naby Keita potentially being good for this one. Very good when he's under pressure and that sort of thing. But you think back to him being hooked against Real Madrid, it sort of seems highly unlikely that he'd be brought back in for this. What do you think the future is for him? I mean, you'd assume that Klopp would want to put him back in the team at some point before the end of this season.
It's difficult to because just where are you putting him in, and when, and at this stage, I'm sure we will see him again at some point before the end of the season. But at this stage, I just don't know how you return him to the team. I certainly wouldn't be putting him in anytime soon. It'll be really interesting to see what happens next, because I think Klopp, he's the type of player that Klopp has wanted to persevere with. We've seen him drop him into games like he did in Madrid, almost quite randomly at times. And I think he's someone that perhaps trains quite well, and they see something in. But I just wonder whether that was almost a step too far for his career, whether he can get that back after what transpired in Madrid in terms of the way he was brought off. I'm really not sure. I think something big needs to happen for him between now and the end of the season, and I just don't really see where he gets the game time. So it's a tricky one, but I certainly wouldn't be putting him in this because I think it's going to be high intensity. And the one thing that we've seen with Keita, I think, is he just goes missing too often. I think perhaps he is quite good on the ball, but he's just too often on the periphery of games, and you want to see someone in this game who's going to be more involved, who's going to put themselves about a bit, and that's James Milner.
Lynch, is that the same for you? Are you sticking with James Milner again? It sort of seems strange when you think back to all the options that Liverpool have got. We seem to be picking James Milner in our teams.
To be honest, I don't know about this one. I think Fabinho obviously is definitely started. Absolutely no doubt about his place. I think Wijnaldum is in similar territory, even though his performances haven't been quite as impressive this part of the year. Certainly, I think there's been a slight drop off, but he's been asked to do an awful lot this season. But I think he'll be on there again because every time he's available, Jurgen Klopp picks him starting midfield. So I think the position and the decision is maybe between Thiago and Milner. I think a lot of his thinking maybe around the Real Madrid game, and this is how I see it, is that he didn't want to get in a battle of trying to control the game against Kroos and Modric because they are so much better at it than anyone else. So he didn't go with Thiago, or this is what I think anyway. He didn't go with Thiago because he didn't want to try and engage in that type of midfield battle, knowing that Liverpool would lose it. Whereas against Leeds, I think because they've got a similar pressing style and they want to put pressure on the ball all the time, he'll go the other way and think, okay, this is not maybe a game for Milner, who is the player you want to press and get stuck in. He'll go for Thiago to try and say, okay, well, we can be the team that controls in this game, and maybe Thiago is the one who can offer that because of his quality in possession. So my thinking is that possibly he'll go with that, Thiago, Wijnaldum, Fabinho midfield, and try and sort of, it's got a nice little mix, hasn't it? We've seen it's played well before that midfield as well, and I think also he might not want to ask too much of Milner because I think he's done that before and given him a hamstring injury by playing him too frequently. So I think he might just pull him out for this one and think he'd be a really, really handy sub off the bench and give Thiago his game.
Yeah, lots of things to ponder for Jurgen Klopp, and the same can be said in the forward line as well, Gorsty, in terms of which 3 of 4 presumably that you'll pick for this one. Is it a case of Mane or Jota really? Would you have Salah certainly in there and probably Firmino as well?
I'm not sure whether I would have Firmino actually. I think Jota might be the one for this one. I think in Madrid, we can say it with hindsight now, but perhaps going with Firmino over Jota would have been the call, so just to help it stick. A little bit better up top because Liverpool just kept losing it and it kept coming back. But Jota at the moment is undoubtedly a bigger goal threat, isn't he? He scored twice as many actually as Firmino this season. So for me it's Mane, Salah and Jota.
I'm going to go with Firmino, Jota on the left, Salah on the right. Joe, what about you? What do you think?
I think I'm going to go with Gorst and go with Jota instead of Firmino for very much the same reasons. Again, I thought Firmino would have been the right choice in Madrid because he would have kept the ball a bit better. And I find Jota, I don't actually like him from the start as much. I much prefer him coming on as a substitute because he's just got an incredible knack of finding little gaps, perhaps when defenders are tired or perhaps when Liverpool have really put pressure on the team and it's not quite happened. He seems to come in and find those gaps. But I think in a game like this, where it will be quite end-to-end, he's always looking to go forward, isn't he, Jota? He's always looking to turn with the ball and find space. So I think that could work well if Liverpool can win it back in transitions and move quickly and get it forward. It could work well for Liverpool. So, yeah, I would probably go for Jota on this occasion.
And Lynchy, just to finish us off, which way are you going to go? Is it a straight choice for you as well between those two?
Yeah, I think I would probably agree with you and go with Jota over Mane. I was sort of surprised, to be honest, to see Mane starting against Real Madrid. No, he started well in that game, sort of fell away, and his confidence just isn't there. I think the decision there is between Jota and Mane. I think Jota, even though didn't have a great performance as a sub against Real Madrid, which is rare for him. He's usually absolutely brilliant off the bench, isn't he? I think he's maybe earned his spot over Mane, and I think Firmino, you probably need, even though it's not been perfect this season, you need his decision making in the final third in terms of when to give and to drop off and create space for others to make Jota and Salah as dangerous as they can be. And I also think his pressing and running about will sort of help against Leeds, because they are very sort of physical. So I think, yeah, that's the pick for me, is Jota on the left and then Salah and Firmino, the rest of the front three.
Yeah, I think Firmino could be quite useful just to drop into Leeds' number 6. Calvin Phillips, obviously not the same quality as Tony Kroos or anything like that, but a similar sort of game plan, I think, for me. We'll just go through and give our score predictions before we finish. I think there'll be plenty of goals. Liverpool, hopefully, a lot more clinical than they were midweek, Gorsty. I'm going to go for 3-1 to Liverpool. What do you think?
It's going to be tough. Definitely. It's and as you say, I think there will be goals. There usually is when Leeds are involved. So 3-2, I'll go with Liverpool.
Joe?
I think I'm going to go for 2-2. I think, of the games that Liverpool might drop points, this might be one of them. And I think it will be a good point. I think, obviously Liverpool are desperate to win games, but not losing, I think, away at Leeds would be decent, because then you go into a Newcastle game that you'd quite fancy Liverpool in. Coming out with a decent game. So 2-2. I think there will be goals. I think it will be tough.
A rare draw for Leeds then, Lynchy. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I like 3-1 as well as a scoreline. I'm not backing Liverpool to keep a clean sheet up against Leeds, because I know they will just throw men forward until they do get a goal. But I think there'll be opportunities for Liverpool to score themselves, and I think they'll get a few.
Yeah, certainly. It should be a very, very good game of football on Monday night. That just about brings us to the end of today's podcast, though. We'll be back with the next Blood Red podcast a day later than usual. That will be on Tuesday afternoon, looking back, of course, on Monday night's game at Leeds, but plenty of content before then, of course, in all of the usual places. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, from Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and David Lynch, until next time here on the Blood Red channel, thank you for watching and listening, and goodbye for now.